Greetings, everyone. I'm so excited to bring you this interview with Dr. Richard Oppenlander. I say that right? Oppenlander?
You did? Yeah, it's perfect.
And he is the author of two books and the director of a nonprofit. We will put these links in the information section. His first book, which I read that just blew me away, is called Comfortably Unaware. And it's around how our eating choices are essentially destroying our environment, our habitat, our air quality, our water quality, our soil quality, our health as humans, many indigenous cultures, and a number of other really important things that are going on in the world around our food production system. There's so much I could say, but I think we'll just jump straight into asking questions. And I hope that after this interview, you will feel compelled, if you haven't read his books, to read them and to check out his websites and to spread this message because it's vitally important for humans everywhere.
All you said was important. The key to what you said, though, is again getting outside of self. For instance, if we had individuals from the Marshall Islands come here and speak to you about the fact that if the sea level rises even just 2 or 3 more inches, they're going to be completely wiped out. And so, so climate change is very real. Anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions are very real. The effect of animal agriculture and what we're putting on our plates especially in Western countries, is very real, and the effect it has on those people in other countries, it's a global issue. Climate change is a global issue. We're the ones that are contributing mostly to it. In fact, and yet it's at the expense of those in other countries. You know, we are right now. I mean, it's very interesting because humans have reached a fragile and in a very interesting spot in our evolutionary journey. And we've reached a point in time in the Anthropocene era where we can now, just in the last 100 years, we can now positively affect, but mostly negatively affect, our biosphere. I mean, the litho and hydro and atmosphere, the very environs that sustain us and all other life on Earth. But unfortunately, see, we haven't acquired the wisdom or the maturity to know how to manage this in a sensible manner. And this is where food choice comes in, because our environs are mostly affected by food choice and how we're using our resources and what effect they have on those around us, as well as climate change. So until this connection becomes made, we're going to continue doing damage. In fact, we're in overshoot mode, as you know. And you mentioned a year. I mean, earlier in the conversation, I think you mentioned in the 50s or 60s when we could just moderate maybe. Well, actually, in the mid-1970s, early to mid-1970s, until then, we had been in undershoot mode. We were taking and using our earth and resources where there was enough to replenish. About in the early to mid-1970s, it was equal. Now we're in overshoot mode, and it's becoming excessive each year. It's moving. It's extending. We're right now using. It would take about 1.5 to 1.7 full Earths to sustain what we're currently taking from and doing to our planet.
Wow.
1.5 to 1.7. United States would require about 3.5 Earths to sustain. So in other words, we're taking almost 4 times as much resources from our planet, and also what we're doing in terms of climate change, than what the planet can sustain. And so, and again, instead of just stating that and then going about our merry way, we need to really look at what you had just said by going outside of self, outside of this microcosm, and saying, this is real, it's happening, and it's at the expense of, it will be at our expense eventually. But those in other countries are the ones that are experiencing it right now. And so until we get to that point, I think this goes back to your question about why I'm doing this, is because the voice needs to be heard for those other people and for all those other species. We're losing right now. Again, you may not see, or you meaning the people in the United States, the individuals in the population in the United States and other Western countries may not see much of what I'm about to say next, but it's a fact that's affecting our planet, is that there's a great deal of biodiversity loss, as you know, and with extinctions that we haven't seen in the last 65 million years. We are losing species at a rate of 1,000 to 10,000 10,000 times the background rate, that historic rate that we've seen throughout, millennia. We are now losing 1,000 to 10,000 times that rate. And the principal reason, there may be 5 major reasons, we don't have to go over all of them, but they're all connected to food choice, whether it's habitat loss, or oceanic devastation, climate change, invasive species. They're all related to animal agriculture. And and we're all interconnected, as you know. And that's another thing that we will have to understand at some point in time, how every species on Earth has a place. And when we start dropping out species at a rate of 10,000 times the background rate, then we're jeopardizing our own species, the vitality or the longevity of our own species.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes people just don't realize they can't see the connections. Like, I've had some people argue, well, what's wrong with a little shrimp? Shrimps, it's just a bug of the ocean. It's not a big deal. But then if you look at it, it's like most of the shrimp you're eating is coming from Thailand, and almost all of that is coming from shrimp farms in Thailand or other areas in Southeast Asia. And then if you go and you look at their ecosystems, they've cut away over 50% of their mangroves
Mm-hmm.
to create these shrimp farms. And the mangroves are where all these oceanic species go in to lay and spawn and reproduce. So you're cutting out their capacity to reproduce, and then you're cutting out the next capacity for sustaining populations in the oceans. And that's just like a sliver of what's happening in our oceans. But when I try to explain that to someone, I just get that look like, oh, I didn't know about that.
Well,
And why don't we know about that? It seems like there's the education there is just missing. And I think if people knew more, that they
well,
would make choices that reflect their truest desires around,
in a
having,
way, yeah, no, you're right. In a way, I mean, the awareness levels have to be improved across the board. Though it's not, this can't happen through only a grassroots effort. I mean, it has to also be organizations that we entrust to protect our environment. It has to be also with politicians that we mentioned earlier that are in a position to not only be elected, but then to find those policies and direct their activities towards what's in the best interest of humans now and future generations. I mean, what you said is important, but most individuals, I believe, would want to make a change, which is why I'm doing what I'm doing. And
exactly.
there's no question I have a lot of other things I'd rather be doing with my life if I thought nobody would listen. And so while I know the number are not listening, I know that the message has to be, delivered, and there are enough that do care.
Yeah.
And so we can make the change. The problem is we do have these timelines. You were talking about the oceans. I mean, it's predicted that by the year 2048, so by the year 2048, it's
Just
predicted
not
that
that far away.
not that far away, all commercially recognized, meaning the fish that are caught for food, but also fish that are in other ecosystems that we now recognize are there, that have connections to these these other fish species. 95% of them, if not all of them, will be extinct. We won't be able to find them. And the oceans today are, as you know, 30% more acidic than they've been in the last 300 million years. And at that time, 95% of all species in our oceans were extinct. And it also required 30 million years to recover. And so the damage that's being done in our oceans right now is irreversible. We will not see recovery in our lifetime. And so for those people that are eating shrimp, even though it might be taking place in aquaculture, which is now at about 49 to 50% of all the fish that's consumed in the world, there's still a connection to our oceans. The other 50% is being devastated. And the omega-3s that people are searching for aren't needed from fish. Protein's not needed. There's baggage, as you know, all the way along with any animal product. But the one thing that needs to be understood is our oceans as well as our rainforests, are the lifeline of our planet. And so when those become devastated, as they are, it will eventually catch up to us. And especially when you're looking at the devastation of our lifeline, the lungs of our planet, essentially, both providing oxygen for us, both mitigating our greenhouse gases that we're emitting. But the fact is that while that's happening, our population is growing to 9.6 billion predicted by the year 2050, with an increase, by the way, predicted increase in consumption and therefore production of all animal products. So we're actually doing the opposite of what we should be doing. And with our oceans, it's not only acidity, but it's pollution, but it's not just pollution. It's pollution from nitrogen runoffs from what we're doing on land. So oceans are affected by what we're doing on land with animal agriculture, with the greenhouse gas emissions our oceans are trying to mitigate, which is why they're becoming acidic, and also by nitrogen runoff with the 500 or more, there are more than 500 nitrogen flooded dead zones where nothing can even grow in our oceans anymore, primarily from animal agriculture on land. But also, I've often said that that aside, it won't matter how acidic our oceans are, because we're also depleting our oceans of ecosystems and species to the point where they're becoming extinct, irrespective of the acidity and the nitrogen influx of nitrogen, because over 90% of all large fish are now have been depleted, and over 1,000. There's 1,081 species that have been monitored over the last 25 years, and all of them are overly exploited. Over 85% of them are to the point where they may not recover that within our lifetime. And they're all interconnected, as you know. And so I'm trying to connect this back to the movements you were talking about. So the movement to eat less meat essentially it's an evolutionary process, a very slow one. And eat less meat correlates for most people to eat more fish. And when they talk about meat, they talk about red meat, which every meat is red. They all have blood vessels, and they all bleed, and they all have sensation. But that aside, it typically would mean that most people would increase dairy, which they're doing, and they're increasing fish, which they're doing. And so we're not winning at all in terms of the message, and certainly in our footprint on the effect we have on our planet right now by consuming more fish and just eating less beef. So my thought is that we just have to leave the oceans alone entirely, do everything we can to not eat any product from any live animal product from the ocean, because the fact is that right now there's no such thing as sustainable commercial fishing, and this goes back to my definition of sustainability. If we just had that in front of us, the fishing industry, the commercial fishing industry, wouldn't exist because it doesn't fit the definition of sustainability. And there's a large topic about that in terms of the two largest sustainable certified organizations, Marine Stewardship Council and Monterey Bay Aquarium Seafood Watch, and how flawed they are. But basically what's happening is that they're ruining our oceans by not only depleting it of the species I just mentioned, but also the secondary effect on these various ecosystems. Everything's interconnected, as you know. It's an infinite amount of connectivity. And when they're discussing sustainability, they're specifically looking at various fish within certain target groups, and they are not taking into consideration all the effect on various ecosystems. There's a cascading effect when the fishing industry changes the population of one species. They effectively alter and modify complete marine ecosystems by a cascading effect on predator and prey that they haven't calculated. And then they're also affecting it by serial depletion. They take target fish, the one that you want to eat, they deplete those target fish, and then they just move on to the next commercially viable fish. So it's a very damaging system that we have, and the only way that can be, it won't be turned around in our lifetime, but the only way that we can create a different positive legacy for ourselves so that future generations won't look back and say they completely ruined it for us is to just stop any any consumption of any fish, period, in our oceans or on land that are being produced by aquaculture, and then also just eliminate animal agriculture on land so it won't continue devastating habitat and also the runoff and the effect of carbon dioxide and greenhouse gases for our oceans, the mitigation of greenhouse gases by our oceans.
Yeah, such a huge conversation there. And then